good memory. So it's a pleasure to be here. And I didn't know about the video right before, but it fits right into the theme of my speech, or my talk today, because it's not a speech, it's a talk about multilingualism in children and adults. So my name is Edwin Gerard. I was born in Los Angeles, but I didn't speak English till I started school at the age of 5. And the reason for that is that I came from a 4-generation household where every generation spoke a different language. My great-grandmother was Armenian from Turkey, so she spoke Armenian and English. Armenian and Turkish. My Italian grandmother and her husband spoke Italian and French. My parents spoke all those languages, plus English and some Spanish. So by the time I started kindergarten, I could understand 3 languages. As a result, I've been able to travel all over the world and speak many different languages. I've taught besides the US and France, I've taught in Italy, I've taught in India, and most recently in Tunisia. And everywhere I went, I really did feel at home because I did have this tremendous privilege of having been raised multilingually. Now I'm back in LA, and I'm very privileged and very happy to be serving as admissions director at Le Lycée Français de Los Angeles, from which my son graduated, by the way. And I'm still not sure what type of a parent I was. I think I might have been a bit of an expert and kind of a CIA operative on the side. But anyway, thank you for opening my eyes. I'm glad those days are over now, and I can start on my granddaughter. So in my family, the French language played a very specific role because of this Tower of Babel, where people were very position-oriented about their opinions, conversations very quickly and swiftly became heated arguments, and people were very impassioned about their views on politics, on religion, or anti-religion, or morals, etc. And very quickly, the tone would rise and volume would go up, and somehow, strangely enough, when they'd switch to French, which they all spoke, the volume would kind of go down, and everybody would start speaking very reasonably to each other. And I think the reason for that was that there was something about their French education, because they all were schooled in French schools in different countries in the world, something about the focus on deductive reasoning skills and critical thinking became a habit. So even now, sometimes when I'm talking to my son, if we switch to French, we kind of become very reasonable men talking to each other about an issue rather than getting emotional about it. And I learned very young that was a good trick in my family. It was a diplomatic trick, was to make them switch to French so they wouldn't get really angry with me. So I remember when I was a teenager, if I'd come home really late one night, past my curfew, and I'd find my father waiting up for me, furious. Gente hinchas, what are you doing coming home at this hour? And I'd go, mais papa, pourquoi tu t'inquiètes? And he'd say, which means, Dad, why are you worried? And he'd say, ben oui, je suis un peu inquiet quand même. And, un peu inquiet, which means, yes, I am a bit worried. Un peu in French is I'm sure almost all of you know what it means. It means a little bit. But un peu is a very important phrase in French because the minute you use un peu, it immediately de-dramatizes the situation. And people calm down. It's interesting. In France, everything's un peu. If you ask somebody, you never say I'm sick, for example. You say, je suis un peu fatigué, which means I'm a bit tired. Because in France, you're either fine, or you're a bit tired, or you're dead. It's because the French don't think it's elegant to go into detail about one's physical ailments. I remember recently I was at a dinner. I was invited to this dinner in Redondo Beach, and the hostess made this wonderful meal, and we all sat down, and she started talking about her bunions. And really got into detail on the bunions, like about how the nerve was pushing against the next toe, and that toe was longer than her big toe, and everybody sort of chimed in on bunions. And I thought, I can't imagine this conversation taking place in France. It's just not part of the conversation. And what you learn when you learn languages is not just vocabulary and grammar. You're also learning codes of communication. In other words, what subjects people talk about in certain situations and what subjects you don't talk about. And not only, using un peu and not talking about physical ailments, you also choose certain words you use in situations. Like Madame Cabaz talked about how it's very popular now to compare American parenting with French parenting, and for some reason people think French kids are, less hyperactive and there's less ADHD. And I often wonder about it. Does it really have to do maybe with the language? Because French parents don't use words like bad or good when talking to their children about their behavior. They'll tell their children, sois sage, sois raisonnable. They won't say be a good boy or a bad boy or a good girl, bad girl. And the reason when they start using sage, which means wise, be sensible, it trains children from an early age to think about the consequences of their actions so that they know why they shouldn't be stuffing their mouths with chocolate all day or why not to bite their playmate in the sandbox. What children learn at a very early age stays with them for the rest of their lives. And the same is true for language acquisition. Language acquisition, the child's mind till the age of 6 is changing more and learning more through language acquisition than through any other cognitive process in its life up till the age of 6. Their brains operate differently from adult brains. Now, Dr. Eric Ledenberg was a renowned linguist and neurologist who taught at the Harvard Medical School. I don't know if any of you have heard of Eric Ledenberg. He said, children have a superior ability to learn a foreign language. It's biological. There's a flexible stretch of time, a period of functional plasticity before the brain lateralizes language into a rigid compartment. Now, that doesn't mean you can't learn languages after the age of 12. But it's true that children who can speak 2 or more languages before 12 have no trouble learning a 3rd, a 4th, or even a 5th language later in life. The American Psychological Association says early childhood language immersion not only makes them better speakers, but better thinkers. Multilingual kids have superior focus and the ability to tune out distractions. And they do better on their SATs and all kinds of tests, not only in language, but also in math and sciences. So you might ask, well, why bother learning other languages? The whole world is learning English anyway. So yes, it's true. The world is getting smaller, and more people are speaking English and dressing the same and looking the same. But you can't really scratch the surface of another culture if you don't speak at least un peu of the language of that culture. Imagine going to, I'm sure you've all been to a gathering where there was somebody there who didn't speak a word of English, who was sitting in a corner, and some kind souls might walk over to them and try to strike up a conversation, but after a few minutes, that person will eventually go off and try to talk to someone else. Now, that person sitting there by themselves, not speaking English, might be a brilliant scientist or a poet, or might have some wisdom that might change your life, but you'll never know that because they don't speak your language. Now, put yourselves in the place of that person when you go to another country, and think about how people perceive you. If you can at least speak a little bit of their language, the quality of listening is going to change. The entire relationship with those people will change. Because unfortunately, human beings have this tendency to think, if people don't speak the language you speak, well, they probably don't have much to say. It's sad, but it's kind of the truth. And if you can speak the language of the country you're going to, people will listen to you differently. You're not lumped into this kind of big gringo blob of people coming into the country. Unfortunately, other countries perceive as invaders. But by speaking to them in their language, you are speaking one-to-one, and you are acknowledging their history, their memory, and their dignity. From 2008 to 2011, I was invited to teach at a U.S. non-governmental organization in Tunisia. No, it wasn't the CIA. Many of my colleagues were young American kids straight out of college who were hoping one day to work for the State Department or the Foreign Service. And a lot of these kids would get up at 5:30 in the morning to go take a 7 a.m. Arabic class so they could at least learn some Arabic before going to teach their English classes. What happened was that a lot of them actually did get kind of fluent in Arabic, and they created bonds with their students and got invited to their students' homes and were able to go, to their houses, speak in a little bit of Arabic to their parents and grandparents who had never known an American or an English-speaking person. And they created bonds with these people. And it was quite amazing and heartening to see not only Americans, but Brits and Australians and, Indians and Filipinos also teaching the language of Shakespeare while learning the language of the host country. In Armenian, we have a saying that goes, Vorkan lezugu khosis, aynkan martes, which means, as many languages as you speak, you are that many times a person. And it's true. In 2011, when the Arab Spring came to Tunisia, or started, was the first one in Tunisia, January of 2011, there were several days where we didn't know what was going to happen. And those of us who lived in downtown Tunis were barricaded ourselves in our apartments for several days because we didn't know which way the tide would turn and what to expect. And some of the teachers, my colleagues, would hear a knock at their door in the middle of the night. And it was the parents of their students who had come to rescue them and take them out of the downtown area to the safety of their homes outside of the city. And other parents, I remember, one parent especially, stood in line for hours to buy bread to take home to their family. It was like an hour and a half wait to buy bread. And then risked her life walking through downtown Tunis, where at that time there were police fighting against the army, and there were snipers, and she crossed town to bring bread to her child's teacher. Now, would this sort of thing have happened if these students didn't study Arabic? Maybe yes, maybe no. But one thing is sure, intercultural bonding comes more easily to kids who are multilingual, because through their openness and their contact with other cultures and other people, they are more informed, more empathetic, and that makes them better citizens of the world. Thank you very much. Merci beaucoup. Muito obrigado. Muchas gracias.